Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Mursaleen wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsan ila yawmiddin. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Amma ba'd. My dear respected students, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Today being the 26th of October 2020, we will be continuing inshallah with our fiqh, and we have been doing the salah, the different aspects of the salah with respect to the preconditions of salah, the compulsory elements. We went into the wajibat, and right now we are in the sunnahs, the sunan of salah. So we'll take it from there. Last week inshallah we touched on some of the sunnahs. You can always refer back to what we would have done. So we'll continue inshallah from the sunnahs. And just as a reference point, our notes here that is on the slide, it is based on the text, the book of Taharat, Salah, Zakah, Fasting and Hajj, compiled by our Shaykh and Ustad, Mufti Shabil. May Allah has mercy on his soul. And we are right now around page 21 of the section of Salah. Yeah, so whoever wants to refer back to the text, they can do that, inshallah. All right, so let's start. So we had reached with respect to salam, that the salam should be allowed. So I'm just going to go back to the last slide. Okay, that if follow one individual utters tahmid silently after ruku, and we understand what is tahmid, the saying of Rabbana lakal hamd. And also the next point, which is what is connected what we are doing today, that the imam recites aloud Allahu Akbar. That is sunnah. Okay, the tasmiyah, which is the saying of Sami'a Allahu liman hamida. Okay, this is on the sunnahs as well. Continuing. And here we have, and salams. So the imam will also say, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. All of these, and the masla is that reciting of it aloud is sunnah. Continuing, to perform ruku' in such a manner that one's back Alhamdulillah. Yeah, to perform ruku' in such a manner that one's back becomes level. Now, this, of course, has been mentioned in a hadith of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in a narration which is found in Muslim, I believe, right? Yeah. But the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned that he said, perform the bowing and the sujood perfectly. So to perform it properly is part of the sunnah. Of course, we know what is the least requirement of it. Okay. In another narration from Hazrat Anas, it is mentioned that the Prophet said that when you perform ruku, keep both hands on your knees and keep the fingers wide. Okay, that's in Tabrani as well. In another hadith, it is mentioned that when the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would perform ruku, his back was so level that if water were to be poured over it, it would remain static, it would not flow off. In other words, it would remain in that spot because of the levelness of it. And we know that water in itself, you tend to flow off, it has its own level. There's another narration, okay, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that when one of you bows, he must recite during the bowing, Subhana Rabbiyal Azim, Thalath, 3 times. Okay, so we'll get into all of that now. Let's continue here. To perform ruku in such a manner that one's back becomes level. So we touched on that. Next, to stand erectly after ruku before performing sajda. So it is sunnah that when a person gets up from the ruku, it is not that he just raises his head and then moves on quickly into sajda, but rather he should straighten the back. He should stand erectly and then proceed towards the sajda. Continuing, to sit between the two sajdas, it is sunnah. Now one must understand that to raise oneself such that it distinguishes the two sajdas that is necessary, that is, part of wujub and the farji of the faith, then that a person must perform two sajdas. And how do we distinguish that? That if a person raises to the position that person is closer to the sitting posture, and if he goes back into sajda, we can say that it has been distinguished. The sunnah here is for a person to actually sit, settle themselves, and then go back to the next sajda. Okay, that's the difference. Continuing, to sit on one's left foot being flat on the ground while the right foot remains upward with the toes touching the ground. So for a male, it is sunnah to be like this, that the person sits with the left foot being flat, okay, as this guy is doing it here, and the right foot remains upwards with the toes touching the ground. Okay, note in the case of female, both feet will be flat while sitting. So we see here, both her feet is flat and they are basically facing towards her right side. Yes, both of them here, and it is basically facing towards the right side. To point the right index finger at the time of reciting the Shahada. So when a person is reciting the Tahiyat, what they would say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. So at the time of reciting the Shahada, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, upon illallah, the finger should be dropped. Okay? That is the Sunnah. Continuing. To recite Surah Al-Fatiha in the third or fourth rakah of such Farz Salah that comprises of more than two rakah. Okay? So it is sunnah to recite Surah Al-Fatiha in the third or fourth rakah of such Farz Salah that comprises of more than two rakah. So which are the Salah that comprises more than two rakah? We have the Zuhr, that's four rakah. We have Asr, which is four rakah. We have Maghrib, which is three rakah. And we have Isha, which is four rakah. And we are speaking about the farz. Okay? So in the third rakah, like in the case of Maghrib, to recite Surah Al-Fatiha is sunnah. There is no recitation of Qiraat and any surah or part of a surah and so on there. And to read Surah Al-Fatiha will be considered as sunnah. Then we mentioned that in those rakah in which Surah Al-Fatiha is sunnah, at least a person can stand for the time it takes for three tasbih, for that posture of qiyam to be considered as valid. And qiyam, it is the compulsory element there. So, for the third rakat, that is in Maghrib, and the third and the fourth of Dhuhr, Asr, and Isha, these rakats, we'll say that Surah Al-Fatiha will be considered as sunnah to be recited. Continuing, to send peace and blessings upon the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and to recite the dua of the Quran or Hadith in the last sitting of Salah before the Salams. So we normally would do this, right? What is the place that it is done? We sit down in the final sitting, the Qadat al-Akhirah. Then we will recite the Tashahud, at-Tahiyat until the end. And after that, we will do the Rood upon the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you recite the word Ibrahim, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin, and then Allahumma barik ala Muhammadin, the two parts until the end. To say this is sunnah, right? And also to recite the dua, some dua of the Holy Quran or hadith in the last sitting before the salam. So after the salams on the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the read upon the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one will recite dua, Allahumma inni zalamtu nafsi, and you have the until the end of it. Okay, so inshallah, when we have finished with all of these different parts and components of the salah, we'll go through the full salah from the very beginning until the end, incorporating all of the different du'as, the tasbih, and of course, these should be done in different postures of salah. Inshallah, we'll spend one class only with that from the very beginning to the end, incorporating, of course, our faraz, our wajib, our sunnahs, our mustabahat, and so on, inshallah ta'ala. Continuing, to turn to the right and left while reciting salams. So we know it is wajib to say salams at least to end the salah. But to turn to the right and turn to the left is considered to be sunnahs. And as a reminder for us, if a sunnah has been left out in salah, does it mean that we have to repeat the salah? Or does it mean that we have to perform what we know as the sajda of forgetfulness, the two sajdas of forgetfulness? We say no. The sunnahs are there to help perfect the wajib. The wajib are there to help perfect the farz. If for some reason the sunnahs are left out, then there is no sajda of forgetfulness, and neither would a person have to repeat the salah. Okay? Of course, a person should not intentionally or without any good reason leave out sunnahs and salah. Yes, there may be reasons. You are extremely late to perform the salah, and if it is that you have to perform everything, you might end up missing the salah. So yes, you can probably leave off some parts, of course, perform the other parts properly. Make sure your farz are in order, your wajib are in order, right? Your wajibat are in order. So if that is done, yes, the salah will be in order. But one should not just aim towards just leaving out everything in sunnah, saying that, you know what, I do have to perform the sajda of forgetfulness, and my salah will be considered as complete. Okay, it will be considered complete from the aspect of the farz and the wajib being fulfilled, but it would be lacking in rewards. Okay, if there are no excuse for such. All right, continuing here. So continue with another aspect of salah, and that is the mufsidat. Afsada yufsidu, you all studied in Arabic, right? So the verb afsada yufsidu, it means to nullify, to make null and void. So mufsidat refers to the factors which causes something to be null or void. So mufsidat salat, it is that section that deals with all of the nullifiers of salah, the things that affect the salah such that it will become null and void. So you can follow here. There are certain factors which cause salah to become nullified. There are certain factors that cause the salah to become nullified. Such salah will have to be repeated. So if a factor that caused the salah to become null has been done, could a person just perform the sajda of forgetfulness for that? No, it will not be done. So a person will have to repeat the entire salah. What are some of these nullifiers of salah? Now we are learning this so that we will not make the error, and at the same time, if we know that a situation will arise that it happens whether in Jamaat or we can help someone, mashallah, we will be able to give some sort of a directions, right? Of course, when you're doing certain things, it is necessary to do things with hikmah and wisdom at the same time. All right, so what are some of these stuffs? One, you have to speak during salah. Intentionally or unintentionally nullifies the salah, even if it be a single word. So, like for instance, someone comes and they're looking for something and they ask, you're in salah, and they ask, hey boy, the key it on the table? And in salah, you say yes. Salah become null. Okay? Here it was intentionally. Perhaps you didn't really intend to say it, but it just came out as a natural response. You said yes. Now it's 3 letters, but that would cause the salah to be considered as null. There should not be any sort of interference in the salah with anything like uh, you know, other than what is recommended from the Quran and the Sunnah. Continuing, without necessity to clear one's throat, producing a word or a sound that can be spelt will cause the salah to become null and void. So, there are some people at all times that claim to, you know, all the time for no reason. Now, they are not the one who actually is leading the salah. The imam is leading salah, and he's the one who is doing kirat. But then others would, as a habit, unnecessarily clearing the truth. If it is that that it produces a sound which can be spelt and can be recognized as a word, then the salah will be considered as null and void. Okay, so take note of that. Let us not do things that are unnecessary in salah. Right? So we'll see after as well. To overdo certain actions can lead the salah to be considered as null and void. So what is the point here? To clear the throat, producing a word or a sound that can be spelled. Right? Continuing. If this is done out of necessity for recitation of Quran, then the salah will not become null and void. Now this is like, for instance, in the case of the imam. The imam is leading and he has to recite, but then there's some quotes and films that is on the throat, which is preventing him from actually reciting Quran. So in that case, and he tried to cough it out, this would be allowed for him. And if in that process, unintentionally, a sort of a sound comes out that can be reproduced, then the intention was not that he has a valid excuse for trying to clear his throat. The sound that came out naturally that probably resembles something that we would know, it will not be considered because there was a necessity for him, other than a person who is just listening in salah, and it would be different. Even then, too, the person who has to clear the throat should be careful not to even try to make any sound. As much as possible, one should try to suppress the sound, and even a person who is the imam, without even trying to produce any song whatsoever, if the clearing of the throat can be done. If a person knows that he has a problem, he is sick, he has an issue with his throat, he has a cough, he has a sore throat, he has a problem with cold, as we say, there, or sinus and so on, that would affect his recitation, and there are other people who are well qualified to do so, then he should allow them to do it, even from before. Or even before, he should go and, clear his throat, spit out whatever it may be by a sink or so, and drink something, as the case may be, so that inshallah he would not have this problem. So he do, a sort of a prep before the salah, so as to avoid any issues that would be there in the salah as well. Okay, so that there is no ikhtilaf or anything like that with him. Continuing, to cry aloud during salah due to some pain or bad news will nullify the salah. When a person is performing salah and then he hears an announcement on a mic, or there is some radio announcement taking place, he hears that is playing in the background, and then that he hears someone who is very close to him or her passed away, or some accident, or some bad news. And as a result, in the salah, the person starts crying aloud. That's the point. If a person is tears that runs off without any loud sound coming out, like for instance, we'll consider loud sound will be that if a person who is next to this individual, they can hear that person. Okay, they can hear actually the sound coming from a person. This this would lead to the salah becoming null and void. Okay, because it is something that has interrupted the salah that is not in the salah in itself. It is not concerning the salah. Now, when we look at the next point, we'll understand that there is a distinguished difference between if something is in salah and something is out of the salah. Let's look at this point here. However, if one cries aloud in salah due to the mention of Jannah or Jahannam in salah, then such salah will become null and will not become null and void. So again, if a person cries in salah due to the mentioning of Jannah or Jahannam, then the salah will not become null and void. And of those people who have khushu and qudu, may Allah make us from amongst them, when they read about Jannah and when they read about Jahannam, the joy of Jannah, it fills their heart. They are totally engulfed in it. And that emotion and that happiness sometimes causes the tears to flow and the heart to grieve for that Jannah. And as such, it may even produce some sound, you know. But that crying in Salah, it is not with respect to something out of the salah, it is something which is in the salah because of kirat that is being recited. You know, you read about the different beauties of the Jannah, about the inmates of the paradise, you read about the palaces of the Jannah, you read about the pleasure of Allah in the Jannah, and all of these things. It will create that type of emotion that a person who has a longing for something, you know, just as if a person is missing someone and then they hear the name of that person, what happened? The heart becomes filled with emotion, so much so that they can even cry as a result of it. Okay, and on the other hand, you have the aspect of the mentioning of Jahannam, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warned those people who are sinful and commit sins that they will be punished in the Jahannam. Quran mentions about the Zalimin, the Fasiqeen, those people who are sinners, those who transgress the orders of Allah, about the punishment that they will have in the Jahannam. And out of fear of Allah, out of khawf, the person then start crying and sound start coming out. Wasn't this the practice of our Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he would cry in salah because of the mentioning of the Jahannam? And of the noble companions radiallahu anhum, that they would also cry in salah because of the fear of Jahannam. So if the crying is as a result of that, then the salah will not be considered as null and void. So there is that point, right? Whether it is connected to salah or it is not connected to salah. Continuing, to beg Allah in salah of such things that can be obtained from people will cause salah to become nullified. Example, asking Allah for money in salah. So a person goes on in sajda, and in sajda he is crying before Allah, oh Allah, Rabbana zidni malan. Oh Allah, you increase me in wealth, in money. Oh Allah, you increase me in honor in this world. And we are speaking we are asking about things that can normally be attained from someone. Go down in sajda and make dua, and they say, no Allah, you grant me the car. Allah, you. So these things will cause the salah to be considered as null and void, right? So to beg Allah in salah for such things that can be obtained from people will cause salah to become nullified. That is like example, asking Allah for money in salah. However, to ask Allah in salah for mercy and forgiveness, as well as to recite a dua of the Quran and Hadith, will not cause the salah to become null and void. know that there's a distinct difference. Again, things which are connected to the worldly things, right? It will be considered as a nullifier if a person asks for it, such in which they can ask some others. Unlike when a person is asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for such gifts and such, things which He Allah can provide for us, and it is not something that human beings. We're asking Allah for mercy, we're asking Allah for forgiveness, we're asking Allah for good qualities, for husnul khuluq, we're asking Allah to protect us from the fire of Jahannam, to protect us from the grave. And if a person were to make dua using these type of meaning and statements, and especially when it comes from the Quran and the Hadith, it will not cause the salah to be considered as null and void. So you need to know that there is a big difference here. Continuing, to greet, to reply to a greeting, to recite Alhamdulillah on hearing good news, etc., during Salah will cause the Salah to become null and void. So, a person is in the masjid and he is in Salah, and a person comes in and he see the person there and he says Assalamu alaikum, and then he turns back in Salah. Now, we know sometimes people doesn't know, right? And we have to use hikmah in dealing with people who probably now start learning about Islam. And that person may think he's doing something that is good. So you have to be careful not to break him to such an extent that you're wasting your time. You're not supposed to do that. Of course, with wisdom, we explain to him that, he should not do that. It is when your person starts Salah, he has given his time. Everything is for Allah now. And greetings and so on should not be done. So use hikmah in dealing with a situation. Or it might well be that a person enters, whether in the home, whether in the masjid, in some gathering, and you're in Salah, and this person, Assalamu alaikum. And in Salah now you say, Wa alaikum salam. That will cause the Salah to become null as well. Okay? Or you hear some good news. Some person had a contract to get, and they hear that the contract was given, or you overhear somebody talking about passing some exams, And with this, the person said, Alhamdulillah, it will be considered as factors which would cause the salah to be considered as null and void. So be careful about this. We do not interrupt our salah with things of this dunya in this manner. So again, I will read: to greet, to reply to a greeting, to recite Alhamdulillah on hearing good news, etc. during salah will cause the salah to become null and void. Continuing, to recite Alhamdulillah after sneezing in Salah will not cause the Salah to become null and void, but should, however, be avoided. Now, a person should not recite, even if it should be said, even if a person says this, it should not be said aloud, and no one should intend saying it, because that's a disturbance of the Salah. Now, we know that when a person sneezes, he should say Alhamdulillah. However, in Salah, that become forgiven for him, and there is no problem if it is that he don't say that. So for him, his own self, he says Alhamdulillah when he sneezes. It is something that is disliked and should be avoided, but it would not cause the Salah to become null and void. However, to do something that is out of the Salah now, like to reply to someone, as in the next case there, to recite Yarhamukallah, when a person sneezes and he says Alhamdulillah, then as a response to him, as a form of a dua, you can say Yarhamukallah, may Allah have mercy on you. So to recite Yarhamukallah during Salah upon the sneezing of another person will cause the Salah to become null and void. Okay, so there's this difference. If a person says Alhamdulillah for his own self, it's not null and void, but it is disliked. However, to reply with Yarhamukallah, it will be considered as null and void. Just as if a person replies to a greeting, replies to salams, the salah will be considered as null and void. Or someone says something and says Alhamdulillah, it will be considered as null and void because it does not pertain to salah. In a like manner, if he says Yarhamukallah, the salah will also be considered as null and void. Continuing, to do an act which does not form part of salah during salah will cause the salah to become nullified. Example, drinking, eating, writing, etc. So if a person he has a glass of water next to him, and when he's in a jalsa position, for instance, he takes a sip of water, the salah is null. You're not allowed to drink, eat, write, laugh, these type of things. It will nullify the salah. So it is basically to do an act which does not form part of the salah. And these actions do not form. When a person says Allahu Akbar, remember we said that takbir is takbir tahrima, that is the commence of salah. The word tahrima itself means making something prohibited. So when you say Allahu Akbar, a person now has made prohibited even the halal things that are normally done. It is halal to drink, eat, to write, to talk to someone, to give salams, you know. But when a person says, you know, Allahu Akbar, then all of those things now become haram for him to engage in. Now, there may be some actions, and we're going into that now. A question is being asked there. I'll respond to that here. So the next point is necessary to note, right? To overdo an act in Salah will cause the Salah to become null and void. Some jurists have defined an overdone act as an act done to such an extent that an observer will definitely consider such person not to be in Salah. Example, buttoning one's clothing during Salah with both hands. So, an overdone act, any action that an observer, when he looks at a person, he has had to question himself, is this person really in Salah? A person is in Salah, he takes out a comb from his pocket and his two hands now he's had to comb the hair. Okay? A person is in Salah and just so he started to take his shirt, the ends of his shirt, and then start sticking it in into his pants. Okay? Or a person in Salah and two hands now he's had to bend down and hit mosquito all around him. Okay? These things will be considered as nullifiers of Salah. You know that it is mentioned here with both hands, right? The reason why both hands is considered because if, for instance, a person is in Salah and just with one hand, his eyes and his glance and so on is towards the spot where he's supposed to be looking at. So for a person, he's looking as though he's in Salah, but then he takes one hand and try to fix his button, or he takes his hand and sort of wipe the nose, okay, or he rubs the skin, but he doesn't overdo it. Like, not excessively at all time, wiping and so on. Now, if there's a need and a person is sneezing, well, yes, that is different, okay? Or coughing, and he uses the back of his right hand to block, the sneeze or the cough, as the case may be, then all of that will be considered in order once he still cannot leave one of the hand in place. If, however, a person is about to sneeze, and then he pulls out from his back pocket a kerchief, and then take the kerchief now, the two hands, put it in front of his nose, and when he done sneeze, he blow the nose and wipe the nose with the kerchief, and then fold back and put it in his pocket. His salah is broken because that is an overdone act. Understand the point? It must be that the resemblance of salah still exists even if a person has to do an action. So if a person scratches the skin, it all depends upon the extent of that. Is it that he take the two hands and scratch all over his head and his back and then, and such that if a person looks at him, but this person not in salah, why? That person will not be considered in salah, and as such, it can be considered as overdone. If a person coughs, not that he is making up the coughing, we spoke about that before, but he really has a problem, sneezing, coughing, then it would not be a problem. And in such situation, a person can take the back of his hand, one hand, and place it over his nose or something like that, whilst the other hand remains in the same position. Okay? In this situation, it will not be considered as breaking the salah. Okay? But try not to overdo anything. In that case, even some of the scholars have defined overdo as being to actually do one particular action in a posture of salah more than 3 times. Okay, in this case, you are overdoing the action. Now, if it is that it is if it is a necessary action, like if a person sneezes and chaos is going on, and he sneezes one, he's doing it with one hand and he blocking the nose, and he sneezes again and sneezes again. No, that is necessary. He can avoid it. It's not like he wants to sneeze. But you're speaking about every minute, he's taking and he's scratching the neck, interfering with clothing. If it is that a person, and this is why it is something that is, I would say, more speculative in nature, that a person now considers that who is an onlooker, looks at this person and sees that, this person is really overdoing it, and he looking like he ain't salah at all, right? Then, out of precaution, the person should repeat the salah, right? Like, for instance, phone is ringing, and a person takes out the phone, look at it, and some of them say, I will call it back, and then take it off. I'm sure probably sometime you all probably would have seen this. That would nullify the salah because he is talking in salah, right? A person's in salah, and then and then he had to fix the topi with one hand. It would not be considered as null. If he fixes it with both hands, now it is again how long does he does that for? Like for instance, a person goes down in sajda, and when he's leaving sajda, the topi falls off. If during the movement from the ground and that movement upwards, whereby he makes himself firm and stand firmly, at the same time he takes the topi and fixes it on his head, then there is no problem with that. Okay, but if the topi falls off, you have to go and fight up now to go and fix that immediately. Next time, probably get a bigger topi, or cut the hair or some kind of thing. I mean, say having a topi on is not a compulsory wajib, but a person risk having a salah having some sort of a ikhtilaf or being disliked based upon his action now. Okay, so as I said, if the topi falls off and it is in the sajda spot, and when you go down for sajda, you actually fit your head back into the same spot, and all it requires is when you're moving up there, you can hold it up and put it back. Then that is not any extra movement because there's already a flow, a motion of rising. You understand? But you're standing up and your topi fall long and you bend down to take up and fix it with 2 hands. Salah is null as a result of that because that is not a necessary movement, so to say. So a question is being asked: if a person make intention for salah, then talk to someone before starting. Now, if the takbir tahrima was not done, then there is no repetition of any wudu or salah or anything like that. Okay, and talking to someone with the intention of salah and not actually starting the salah, it does not nullify the wudu. Okay, that does not nullify wudu. Now there's a masla that if a person, for instance, start the salah and there's a loud laughter that takes place, then the hadith mentions either man dhahika minkum qahqahatan. The hadith mentions that whosoever laughs loudly in salah, when that the next person could hear him, then let him repeat his wudu and his salah. And in that case, the wudu is considered to be broken based upon the hadith of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But that's different. Here, you're asking a question that if a person makes intention for salah and then talk to someone before actually starting, the wudu is not broken. And once he knows that he's going to perform salah, the intention is not a formal statement that has to be made. You don't have to go through the ritual of saying, I intend to perform 2 rakat namaz first, or Fajr Salat, for the sake of Allah, my face towards the Holy Kaaba, and you're following the Imam, you know, following the lead of this Imam. It is not a requirement that you must say that. The intention of the individual in Salah, that you know what, I'm standing here to perform Salah, it is Fajr, even though when you know that already, or you say whatever you want to say, you understand? And then after that, someone asks you something. Say, yeah, come on just now, I will then Salah, right? And Allahu Akbar. That does not nullify anything. Because you know what you're going to do still, and your knowledge of what you are going to do is really your intention here. And that will be considered as valid. Let's move on. Continuing. However, when an act is done in such a manner that will not cause an observer to ascertain that such person is out of Salah, will not nullify the Salah. Example, buttoning one's clothing with one hand during Salah, not with one of his hand, right? Not both hands. With one of the hand, then the Salah will not be considered as broken. Continuing, to turn one's chest away during Salah from the Qibla without valid excuse will cause the Salah to become null and void. So a person is facing towards the direction of the Qibla, Kaaba. He is facing the Qibla. And for no reason, he hears somebody open the door and he just turns to see. Now, if that is for more than 3 times subhanallah, as some of the scholars mentioned, then that will be considered as null. If the head alone turns, it is makruh. Right? It should not be done. And once the chest turns away, then the salah will be considered as null and void. What might be a valid excuse? Valid excuse might be if someone comes and redirects him. You're praying salah in the wrong direction, by turn towards your left, and then he turns. And he's not from the place, he's not too sure. So he takes the direction. Afterwards, he realized that he actually turned away from the Qibla. Then it was a valid excuse in his case because he took the khabar and the information coming from someone else whom he thought was more knowledgeable in this than himself. Okay, or there was some valid reason otherwise, according to the Sharia. Like for instance, the place is muddy and messy and so on, and he has owned an animal, and the animal is, in that case, it may be allowed to perform salah. Everything has its own conditions, but there is not a place to perform the salah. He's sitting on the animal, and that is the only place he can pray. And then the animal is moving and the animal turns a bit away. It will be considered as valid. As I said, there are certain laws, there are certain conditions for all of those things. Inshallah, those things will be discussed at the next time, right? Let's move on again. The salah of a person with tayammum will become nullified by the termination of those valid excuses for tayammum during salah. So a person, for instance, he did not have water. He looked all around and there was no water in the tap, no water in the stream, no water in the well. He looked all around, and whatever the requirements for tayammum, they were met. So he in fact performed the tayammum based upon not having water. And then what happened? During Salah, water came. Then the Salah of that person will be considered as null and void. But this is when? During the Salah. As an example, if a person who performed tayammum because of the absence of water now realizes during Salah the presence of water which he is capable of using for wudu, then his Salah will become nullified. So a person now came and say, he mentioned, I bring the water, boy. Or you hear water coming from the tap and hear it falling. Or immediately hear rain start to fall. Previously there was no rain. You don't even think about cloud self. A rain started to fall, and you see the water has been gathered like in a barrel or a tank or something like that. Then with all of this, because of the fact that the reason for the tayammum, which was a valid excuse, no longer exists, then it will be considered as null and void. Here, because the reason, it no longer exists. You wanted water, now you have the water. All right, the salah of such a person will become nullified whose duration of validity for masa over socks has expired during salah. Okay, we have to start our Arabic. But just as a last point here, the salah of such a person will become nullified whose duration of validity for masa over socks has expired during salah. Now, for a person wearing socks, and I'm not discussing here the type of socks, okay? There's a leather socks that has to be performed masa on with certain conditions. So if the socks is valid and the conditions are valid, then for a person who is a traveler, he has been given 3 days and 3 nights. Okay, whilst a person who is a non-traveler is given 1 day and night, 24 hours and 72 hours. So if a person who made masa over the socks, like he made wudu, he put on the socks and then wudu is broken, and while making wudu now, he wiped over the socks instead of washing the feet, but he's a non-traveler, as an example, then in Salah, that time elapses. With that elapsing of the time, it would cause the Salah to become null and void, because it is as though his wuzu had gone. It went because the time has elapsed for the socks. So let's say 24 hours. He started at 7 o'clock when it was valid, and the next 7 o'clock, not that he put on his socks at that time, 7 o'clock was when the first occurrence of a break of wudu took place. So it is from that time we'll start checking the masa of the socks. Then 24 hours after that, he was performing some salah, some nafil or something. And then within that time, 7 o'clock reached him, it will be considered as null. Okay, so we'll stop at this point. There is just, one or two basic stuffs here to finish off this whole topic. In fact, this is the last slide for the Mufti that. I don't know if I should just do it out one time. Go ahead or no? All right, let me finish off. This is the last one, right? I know we will try to cut short in the Arabic a little bit tonight to finish off in correct time, inshallah. The rising of the sun during Salat al-Fajr will cause that Salah to become nullified. Suppose the performing Salah, Fajr Salah, and let's say Salah, the time for sunrise now is, let's say, 5 to 6. And he starts Salat, and during the Salah itself, before the Tashahud, the sun rises, 5 to 6 reach. The mere fact that the sun has started rising, it will cause the Fajr Salah to be considered as null. So you wouldn't say, okay, well, I started before, No, once the rising of it occurs whilst you are in Salah before the Tashahud, then it is null. The sun reaching its zenith during Salatul Eid will cause such Salah to become nullified as well. Remember, the Eid Salah starts after the sun rise, and then it ends at the time of zenith. Zenith is where the sun is directly over one's head. Understand? When it is like a right angle to the horizon, the point that the person is. So if it is that at that time and the Eid Salah was delayed up to this point and it is now being performed, the Eid Salah will also become null. Next point, the exposure of quarter or more of a particular part of one's aura during Salah for the duration of at least 3 tasbihs will cause Salah to become nullified. So this is applicable to both men and women. Brothers and sisters, you need to be very careful about this. Sometimes brothers perform Salah, but they perform Salah with such a jersey that when they go down in Sajda or they go down in Ruku, it's like half of everything become exposed. And then they reciting Tasbih there 3 times. What is considered to be, if the exposure of quarter or more of a particular part of one's aura, which is the least part, which is the least, the size of an aura, then that will cause the Salah to become null. I will explain this a bit further in our next class, right? So I just want to finish off here. The last point, the mentioned factors will cause Salah to become nullified, provided they occur before the completion of the last sitting for the duration of reciting the tashahhud. So if these things what happened? These nullifiers before the last sitting, because you are the first here. And if it occurs before that, then the salah is null. If it occurs after that, the person can simply give salams and it will be considered, the salah will even be considered as completed, even at that point, even for the salams. So I will spend a little more time with this last point when we go on to our next topic, inshallah, next week. Okay, everyone. Assalamu